plan is to head over to the Blue Ridge Parkway. Waynesboro seems to be the best access point. From there, we went 86 miles down the parkway, which takes a while because you don't drive very fast. Along the way, a hotshot crotch rocket rider came screaming around us. He was an accident waiting to happen. Roy and Rosie were right there in our rearview mirror, just like they had been the entire trip. Our destination was Peaks of Otter, where there is a campground. Signage at the turnoff was very poor and we missed it. By we, I mean I missed it. It's not a simple task to turn an RV around on the Blue Ridge Parkway. This is especially true if you're towing a vehicle. I continued down the road until I found a pull-off that was big enough for both us and Roy and Rosie. Roy was able to turn around with the trailer still attached at that point, but I needed to unhook and do some maneuvering to get turned around. Roy and Rosie headed back to the campground to get us checked in, as it is first come, first serve. Mary and I unhooked, and Mary walked down the road a bit to wave down any traffic coming our way. I pulled out into the road and turned as far as I could, backed up as far as I dare, and pulled forward again. Mary jumped back in the Jeep and followed. She later told me I'd hit a sign, but the back of the RV showed no distress for having done so. We were very careful to make the turn this time. I pulled up to the ranger station. There was no sign of Roy and Rosie, but there was a lady standing around right outside the ranger window. This lady would later become known as the Crazy Lady. The ranger told us Roy and Rosie had gone to pick out a spot where they wanted to camp. She also indicated we should do so as well. So much for first come, first serve. We were just about the only ones that needed serving. In the park, we found Roy and Rosie parked near the bathrooms. Well, at least you could call it near the bathrooms. They were uphill to get to them. It was very steep. Just before you got to them was a spot that looked big enough for us, and we went back to get the RV. Spots in this national park are only wide spots in the road. In reality, they aren't all that wide either. We were parked on the left of the road, just down from us before. On the right was a Sprinter, and then slightly further down and still on the right was Roy and Rosie. The Sprinter turned out to belong to Crazy Lady. By the time we got set up, she had walked back down to where we were. There was not much setting up to do because once again we had no hookups, so all we had to do was level and extend the slides. Crazy Lady wanted to talk. She wanted to know what I knew about diesel engines, seeing as how I was driving one. She said she was having major problems. The indicator kept telling her she was out of debt. When this happens, you're only going to be able to start your coach just a few more times. It is a safety precaution to make sure you don't pollute the world, causing further global warming. She said that she had it checked out and it was functioning properly, and she had plenty of depth. She was traveling alone. She had an appointment with another Mercedes-Benz dealer, but they couldn't see her for several days. She was stuck right where she was because she only had a limited number of starts left before her coach would totally shut down due to lack of depth. She was very concerned about ultra-low fuel, and I warned her about biodiesel. When I walked over to her coach, I couldn't help but notice that her slide was extended further at the bottom than it was at the top. I pointed that out to her, and she said yes, she knew it, and she had done it on purpose. Somehow it gave her more room. I'm not sure how you do it on purpose or why you'd want to, but I didn't argue with her. She came to the conclusion that I was God's gift to single Crazy Lady campers. I didn't need that. My advice to her was to crank up and drive to the Mercedes-Benz dealer, find a nice location on the back of the lot, park, set up, and start the thing until it wouldn't start no more. I would force them to work on me earlier, or I would have a nice lighted spot in town to wait. That evening, we ate dinner at the Peaks of Otter restaurant at the lodge. We sat peering out across the lake, eating our burgers and soup. Later, we went for a walk along the lake. Back at the campground, I ran the generator for a period of time to build up the batteries. Check one more thing off that I wanted to accomplish this trip. We were spending the night on the Blue Ridge Parkway. Any mile of the Blue Ridge Parkway looks much like the next mile. It was a very interesting journey, but it was starting to get old. The leaves were starting to change, and along one stretch of the road, the clouds were actually below us. There was a turnoff that would take us into Roanoke, and we took it. We spent that evening in a Flying J. Now Roy and Rosie have had both the Walmart experience and the Flying J experience. Roy and Rosie went into Denny's for dinner, but Mary and I ate barbecue out in the parking lot. Later that evening, I walked over and invited Roy and Rosie back to Denny's for dessert to celebrate Roy's birthday. Mary got a call that evening to tell her that KT had been diagnosed with lymphoma. We decided we should head for Ozark. We went over and said goodbye to the Griscoms and told them we were making a side trip. They decided to head for Ocala. I would give this trip an A+.